So now we're going to move on to the AI for Social Good panel. And we have three panelists here today. We're all very accomplished in the field of artificial intelligence. And I'll pass it over to Nikhil, who's going to begin introducing these panelists.
Yeah, once again, thank you, Mr. Batakuri, for the thoughtful and insightful workshop. Hi, everyone. My name is Nikhil Pasadeni, and I have been a part of GCL for the past 3 years. And I'm honored to introduce our first panelist in the AI for Social Good panel, Elizabeth Bondi. Liz is a PhD student studying computer science at Harvard University. Her research interests include computer vision, deep learning, UAVs, multi-agent systems, and their applications to conservation and sustainability. She's currently working on using UAVs to automatically detect poachers and animals in thermal infrared images using deep learning techniques. She's also received many awards for her works, including Best Application Demo at AAMAS 2019.
So I'm also very excited and honored to introduce our second and next panelist, Lily Xu. Ms. Xu is currently a third-year PhD candidate at Harvard University studying computer science. Her research is in the applications of AI, especially in online learning and game theory, to challenges in sustainability. In 2018, she graduated from Dartmouth College as a CS and Spanish major, and she is extremely passionate about reducing negative impacts on the environment and having a social positive impact. Ms. Xu had her work on Pulse featured by Harvard Seas, was a panelist of Harvard Seas events, co-organized a mechanism designed for social good, or MD4ASG working group on environment and climate. In the fall 2020, she will be serving as a head teaching fellow of CS 182 AI.
I'm incredibly excited to introduce our third and final panelist, Ms. Grace Ermey. Ms. Ermey is a research software engineer who builds machine learning platforms to help protect endangered animals like sharks, elephants, and killer whales. Her work with Vulcan Inc. in Seattle, Washington, focuses on automating the most tedious aspects of conservation work so that wildlife researchers can focus on more important tasks. As an AAAS IF-THEN ambassador, Ms. Ermey shares her STEM journey with students in Northwest Washington and across the country to show them that technology can be an avenue to make a positive impact in their communities and around the world. Ms. Ermey holds both a BS and MS in computer science at Eastern Washington University, and in her free time, knitting, spending time with family and friends, cheering on Seattle sports teams, reading, and getting outside in the incredible Pacific Northwest.
So before we start the panel, I think we will have two moderators from GCL who will be leading this panel, Sanjana and Maria. And without further ado, let's welcome all three of our panelists and kick off the AI for Social Good panel.
All right, hi everyone. Thank you so much for having me today. I'm very excited to be talking with you. I just wanted to tell you a little bit about one of the projects that I've been working on in the past few years that I'm very excited about, and that is in using drones for conservation. And so I, again, thank you for the wonderful introduction. I'm gonna just elaborate a little bit more on that first. If we could go to the next slide, please. Thank you so much. So I just wanted to mention that I grew up in upstate New York in a small town. And while I was there in high school, like many of you may be right now, I really liked math and science, but I wasn't sure at all what I wanted to do with it. So while I was in high school, I found an internship opportunity to do at Rochester Institute of Technology, which is near Rochester, New York, which you can see up in that map, hopefully, near one of the Great Lakes. And this internship opportunity helped direct me on my path. I was able to try out research and decide that that was a really cool path for me. And so I hope we can talk a little bit more about this once we start getting into some of the discussions. Please feel free to ask any questions you might have about it. But anyway, I liked that internship experience so much that I decided to pursue my undergraduate degree in imaging science at Rochester Institute of Technology. And I did a little bit of research there. I decided again that I liked it so much I would continue on to grad school, where I went to USC, and now I'm at Harvard. And there should be just one more slide, thank you. I'm hoping to become a professor eventually, so I would love to talk with any of you about more details about how I chose this career path as well. Cool, thank you. So now, how can drones help? So like I mentioned at the beginning, one of the projects I'm most excited about is trying to use drones for conservation. So these are two images showing different kinds of drones that you might have heard of or not. On the left side of the slide, we have a fixed wing drone. This can fly for really long distances at higher altitudes and very quietly with a camera aboard it. And then on the right, we have one that you might be able to see in a place like a Walmart or a Target while you're shopping in the electronics section. And it usually will fly for a little bit less time than those fixed wing drones that you see on the left, but it can be equally effective in helping for wildlife conservation. And again, the idea behind all of this is to try to help protect more animals. So how can drones actually help with this? I'll tell you a little bit now, hopefully. So here is a figure showing a conservation drone. Again, this is one of those fixed wing drones, and it has a camera aboard it. And so while we're flying this drone, we can fly it around national parks or areas where animals might be located. And we can send real-time information to people in the field who may be watching these videos. Can we go to the next slide, please? Thank you so much. And by doing these, by streaming these live videos, we can do things like preventing wildlife poaching, mitigating human-wildlife conflict, and monitoring animal populations, which I think you'll hear a little bit more about from one of the other wonderful panelists. So I'll tell you a little bit more about my work in trying to prevent wildlife poaching. If we could go to the next slide, please. Awesome. So while we're flying these drones around, it can actually be pretty challenging. So while we're sending this live stream video to our people who are watching these videos, they may have to watch videos the whole time they're trying to monitor a park. This could be all night long if they're trying to prevent illegal wildlife poaching, or even longer if they're perhaps trying to monitor during the day as well. And furthermore, a lot of these parks are the size of states in the US. They're really, really large. Again, you might hear about this from one of our other wonderful panelists. And so another question is, where should we be flying drones throughout these parks? And both of these are questions that AI can help us to answer. So if you go to the next slide, please. This is just an example of one of the images that you might get from one of these drones while it's flying around a national park. And you can actually see highlighted in these red boxes that we have elephants. They're a little bit brighter than their surroundings, so hopefully you can see their shape a little bit. One of them is hiding behind a tree in the top left red box. And so our goal in trying to make the drones easier to use for humans trying to do conservation is to use AI to try to automatically identify animals like these and even humans. And so if we go to the next slide, this is just an example of some of the things, some of the results that we've been able to get using AI to try to automatically identify animals and humans in the field. And so on the left, we have some elephants that we automatically identified using AI techniques. And on the right, we have some humans. And that particular one was from a field test that we did with some of our collaborators in the field who were able to try to be on the ground and fly the drones around in real time to do these detections and make sure that the system was operating well. Next slide, please. The other thing that I mentioned at the beginning is then how can we fly these drones around these really large protected areas efficiently to make sure we're protecting as many animals as possible, for example, or maybe counting as many animals as possible. Next slide, please. So again, we can use AI to do this. In one case, we have a map of a protected area in Africa in which we've worked. And I've just dropped a few pins to represent different locations where we may need to fly around with our drone. And so we can use AI to decide which of these targets we should place our drones at, where they should be flying. We can also, if you look at the image on the right, we can also even use drones to try to deter people from poaching, if we're trying to prevent wildlife poaching in particular, by turning the lights on aboard our drone. And again, I'm happy to talk more about all of these when we have a little bit more time afterwards. But if we could just go to the next slide, I would just love to provide my email address to you. If anyone has any other questions that we maybe don't get to today, please don't hesitate to reach out. Even questions about other things than research, like other questions that may come up in the session today. I'd love to talk with you all. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that, Liz. As mentioned earlier by that great introduction, my name is Lily, and I am also a PhD candidate at Harvard University. So I actually do work as well, similar to Liz, on AI for wildlife protection, but I also have another project related to the environmental sphere that I thought I would talk about, just so you have a little bit of more exposure to different kinds of applications of computer science. So here, I'm going to talk about protecting our ecosystems. So we can go ahead. Okay, so just a little bit of background. Sorry, the numbers are messed up. I made this in a different platform, and it seems to have rendered weirdly here. So just a little bit of background about myself. I sort of got started messing with computer science and programming back in 2008 when I was 12 years old. So here is a website that I used to maintain called InkDreamer, where I used to put up blog posts about all of my thoughts and poems I used to write. And I have so much fun like messing around with Photoshop, making cool graphics and websites for myself. As you can see from the above one, I didn't have a very good sense of readability. So the bright pink background might not be advised if you're trying to do your own website in the future. And if any of you have websites, I encourage you to just send a little link in the chat or just tell me the name of your blog and I would love to check it out. So then from a little bit afterwards in 2010, I started high school at a big public high school. And at this time, similar to Liz, I also really enjoyed math and just sort of thought, well, okay, I don't really know what it was that I want to do, but math is something I enjoy. I still enjoy writing and English. Just had no real sense of what specifically I wanted to do, but I just sort of thought, okay, well, of these things, math is something that I've enjoyed, and it's something that I'm relatively good at. So what can I do with this other than just being like a math teacher, for example? So when I started college in 2014, I thought, okay, well, let me try to figure out what are cool applications of math or more interesting things I can do with this. And then just sort of thinking back to my experience back in middle school when I used to design websites, I thought, oh, I might have a lot of fun doing something called like working with computers, because that requires all this logical thinking that's used in math as well. And it's something that more and more companies are getting interested in. So this, and as you all know already, because given that you're all here at this AI Summit, computer science and AI and machine learning in particular have just sort of really, really grown in importance. So we can move on. Okay, so I want you all to imagine that you're a landowner. So you own this plot of land on the top, and you need to decide what to do with it. So with this plot of land, you have two options. The first option is you can preserve this land, keep it intact, and provide everybody else in the world with benefits of ecosystem services. So these are clean air, as you can see from this Avatar: The Last Airbender symbol, good climate, for our entire Earth, and then a habitat for wildlife to live in. And then, because you're enrolled in this special program, they'll actually pay you an amount of money for preserving this area of land. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. Or you have the option of deforesting your land and collecting this timber that you can sell on the market. So that way you can earn money from the timber versus earning a little bit of money for preserving your land. So what would you do in this scenario, and how much money would it take for someone to pay you so that you choose the option on the left where you're preserving the land? So I want you to think about that. We can move to the next slide. Okay. So these are called payments for ecosystem services. So as mentioned, these ecosystem services are for positive goods, such as clean air that everyone benefits from. But the challenge there is these are called positive externalities, because even though everyone benefits from them, the people providing them, the landowners who are preserving their ecosystems, aren't receiving any financial compensation for them. So here's an economic imbalance in which they're providing something that everyone receives benefit from, but they themselves are not receiving any benefit from. So payments for ecosystem services try to remedy that economic incentive imbalance by actually offering payments for these good actions. And it could be things from preserving forests to not polluting our waters to providing any other type of positive ecosystem benefit. And this might sound like a pretty crazy concept to actually just pay people to not really do anything, but these are actually huge programs all throughout the world. Costa Rica has had a program ongoing since 1996, and Uganda, for example, has had a series of ecosystem service projects where they actually did a scientific experiment with a randomized control trial where they gave some villages a PES program. They gave some villages just nothing, just had that go regularly. And what they found is that people actually preserved a lot more when these PES systems were actually implemented. So that shows the effectiveness of this program. And throughout the world, there are over $40 billion spent every single year on these PES programs, with over 550 programs throughout the world. And the UN, the United Nations, is one of the biggest contributors of these programs. So let's move on. Okay, so you all have been imagining what it's like to own your plot of land and what you're going to do with it. So now I want to just put some numbers more concretely. So let's suppose that there are these two plots of land that you have, and they're right next to each other. Each one is 1 acre large. And the amount of money that you want to sell, that you want to receive in order to preserve this land is $30 for one part and $20 for another part. And the amount, let's pretend that we can put a number to how good clean air is and how good protecting our climate is. And let's pretend that that's $40 a year for the first plot of land and $50 a year for the second plot of land. So if we pay you at least $30 for the first plot and at least $20 for the second plot, we'll receive all of this benefit. And I want you to type in the chat how much that benefit would be if we just preserve those two independently. So hopefully things will come perfect, Yashita. So that's $90 that society benefits from. But if you think about it, if we have two plots of land that are right next to each other, they're actually more valuable than if we just preserve them separately. So these are called complementarities, when two things added together is greater than those things separately. So this is the scenario where 2 + 2 doesn't equal 4, but rather equals 7 or something like that. So here, the benefit that society receives is $120 instead of just $90, even though we're still paying the same cost, which is $50. So here's a problem that we can identify in payments for ecosystem services, and that we want to strategically allocate our payments so that we preserve plots of land that are right next to each other, so we can maximize the benefit to our environment. Next slide, please. Okay, so what we have here is a little example with something called a graph in computer science, and then we can use these algorithms from graph theory, which you might actually have heard about in some of your math classes, depending on which ones you've taken. And what this graph is showing us is it's just putting all of these numbers that we saw on the previous slide into these nodes of this graph. And then the links in between the nodes, the edges, show how much benefit we receive from complementarity. So with this graph formulation, we can now pose this problem of trying to find the optimal PES payment program as an algorithm in computer science. And specifically, we're taking what's called a greedy algorithm, where we just figure out, okay, what's the best thing to do right now and make one decision at a time. So you don't have to think about all of these different combinations and try to keep them all in our head or keep them all on our computer at the same time. You can just go one by one by one by one. And specifically what we're doing here is we're trying to maximize what we call the cost-benefit ratio. So it's just a simple ratio that's looking at how much cost we receive over the benefit that society receives from that land, and also including the complementarity. And if we just iteratively do this, we can get a near optimal PES payment solution. So we can move on from here. Yes, okay. So here's just a basic formulation, but now that we have a model for our problem, we can answer all sorts of interesting questions for it. So maybe if you want to think about this problem later on and draw out these graphs yourself, you might think about what happens if the landowners aren't truthful. So one assumption that we've made is that we know what the cost to the landowner is so that we can design these payment programs. But if they lie to us and they say, oh, this isn't worth $30 to me, it's really worth $60, then they would force us to pay more unfairly to get them to preserve their land. We can think of what if this problem is something that we adapt to over time. So 1 year, the cost is worth $20, but the next year it's $30, and it might just fluctuate from year to year. So trying to think, how can we make these payments strategically as things change over time? Or we can think about, what if the landscape is dynamic and landowners are coming in and out, people are buying new plots of land, they're selling their old plots of land, they're splitting them in half, they're combining them. So we want to think, can our model adapt to these things? So I encourage you to think about all of those things and draw out these little graphs yourself. So if we move on, one more slide. Yep, similar to Liz, I'm just so excited to chat with you all, hear your questions, and just so excited to see your enthusiasm about computer science and AI. Again, I encourage you to contact me. Here's my email address, or if you look up my name, hopefully it's on the website, you can find my contact information from there. So excited to chat with you very soon. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Lily and Liz. Can you hear me? Yeah, okay, sorry, my little box isn't lighting up. Zoom is fooling me. Okay, so today I'm going to tell you about my work using AI for conservation, which is so cool to meet other women also using AI for conservation. I had no idea this was even an option for having a computer science background, you know, so cool to get to hear about other work in this area. But I'm specifically going to tell you about using machine learning and AI for wildlife surveys, and I'll tell you what that means. So I have just a little background about me before I dive into my work. I have a bachelor's and a master's degree in computer science from Western Washington University, and now I work at a company called Vulcan in Seattle, and I was an intern there for one summer, and then they brought me on, and I've been there for about 3 years. And I also am a AAAS If-Then ambassador, which is a really fun part of my job these days. I get to do stuff like this and come talk to students, and also get to do I get opportunities to do fun things like this GoldieBlocks video that I got to do, where I just get to share my work with students and try to, you know, just expose you all to like different options you can possibly take in the future in STEM. So it's a really fun program to get to be a part of with a ton of women in STEM from across the country, and we all get to just talk to students. And so that's a huge part of my job these days. as well. And then in my free time, I love knitting. I made that yellow sweater that I'm wearing in that picture there. And I love hiking and exploring when it's not smoky and gross outside. So next slide. Perfect, thank you. So my work, Vulcan is like a really unique place. We do a lot of different stuff, but a lot of our work revolves around building technology for conservation. And a lot of the projects I've gotten to work on have had to do with wildlife surveys, which is basically taking a ton of pictures of animals in their habitat without disturbing them, and then using those pictures to learn about the animals. And that can be like learning how many animals there are, doing like a census count of the animals, or learning where they live if we don't even know that much about them. And then also we've done a project recently where we're learning about the health of the animals from pictures. So these surveys can happen in a number of ways. I've gotten to work on all three of these projects in these pictures. So a project where we were trying to count elephants using AI, a project where we were trying to count sharks and rays using underwater cameras. And then most recently, this project with killer whales, where we're using drone images to try to learn more about the health of the orcas. And AI is just so, we think it's a really powerful tool here, because these surveys, often scientists are taking hundreds of thousands, if not like millions of pictures during these surveys. And so if we can use AI to help them get through all of those images to get to the part where they're learning the useful information from the images, then that can save them a ton of time and allow them to focus on the parts of conservation work that really need a human expert to be doing the work, because there are a ton of parts of conservation where humans are absolutely necessary. But hopefully some of this just image processing stuff we can offload to a computer to do instead. So next slide, please. Thank you. So just specifically, I'm going to tell you about this killer whale project. Killer whales are my favorite animal, so it's been so exciting to get to work on this project. We're working with a partner called Sea Life Response Rehabilitation and Research. They're also local to the Pacific Northwest, and they do amazing research on all kinds of marine mammals, and just do such awesome work trying to protect them and learn more about them. And so we've gotten to work with them on this project related to the southern resident killer whales, which are the population that's local to the Pacific Northwest. And they, SR3, this organization, they use drones to go survey the whales and take pictures of them. And then they have this very manual process currently where they do a lot of measurements on the images by hand to try to get a really good understanding of the health of the population, because there are only about 72 individuals in this population. So their numbers are declining, hopefully going up as as we keep working to protect them. But the number is very small right now. And so learning more about their health can just give us, we can share that information with policymakers and people who, make rules about how we can interact with animals, and just try to protect them even better if we have more information about their health and how they're actually doing. So next slide. Yeah, so just a little bit more about the project. So because SR3 is doing this very manual process right now, drawing all of these lines like you can see in this picture to try to get a number to describe the health of each individual in the population, we decided that we could hopefully introduce some automation to their process to do some of the stuff faster. Because right now they'll go out and fly their drone for, there are a few months of the year where the whales are really active in the area. And so they'll fly for those few months of the year. And then it takes 6 months to process the images from just 1 month of flying the drone. And so any speed up we can get in that process just gets us those important numbers faster about the health, and they can share them with the right people so that we can inspire action and move forward with protecting them. And just quickly about the whales, they're endangered because of a lack of food. Their main food source is salmon, and the salmon numbers are really declining. And then also a big reason is because of vessel traffic. So whale watching boats and other boats and ships interrupting their communications and also just really stressing them out a lot, which harms their health and their pregnancies and their ability to reproduce. And so, yeah, we're working to just try to automate some of this stuff so that we can attack these problems that are really harming them. So just quickly, then we'll get to your questions. The part of this project that I've gotten to work on has been really fun. Basically, I've been trying to teach a computer to play Guess Who Orca Edition, trying to identify the individuals in the population automatically. And you can do this, human experts do this by looking at this saddle patch on their back, this white patch. And this white patch is unique to each individual. And so you can tell who's who by looking at it. And if we need to know who's who in the images so that we can have a health record of each individual, connected to this year and to last year, and know that if their health is changing by comparing to other images of the same individual. And so in those hundreds of thousands of images, it takes a long time to identify each one in each image. So if we can get a computer to do this, that would be exciting. And it's looking promising so far, but it's been a really cool challenge to work on. But this is just an example of what the problem kind of looks like, and you can guess who this orca on the left might be compared to these 4 options on the right. You can type your guesses in the chat if you want, or we can just reveal the answer and get onto your questions. Calypso, yes, someone guessed Calypso, perfect. Yeah, that's exactly right. And those numbers that popped up there, those are similarity scores. So basically when we get a new image, we compare that using machine learning to to images of each known individual in the population, and then get a similarity score. And the highest similarity score is the one that the machine learning model predicts to be that individual in the new image. And so the closer to 1 that score is, the more certain it is that it's that individual. So in this case, the machine learning model was correct. It guessed Calypso. So cool. Yeah, I'm also just really excited to be here and get to talk to you all, and excited that you're already excited about AI and computer science. So looking forward to hearing your questions.
Hi everyone. So sorry about that. Okay, so I'm Sanjana Chevarala, and I'm going to be moderating this panel today. First, a big thank you to all 3 of our panelists for those excellent presentations. Super inspiring, super interesting. I really like how you guys are super committed to your goals. Participants, if you have any questions, feel free to type them in the chat, and then we'll probably get to those towards the end of the scripted questions and ask. And without further ado, let's get started. So how this is going to work is that I'm just going to ask you guys a question, and then all 3 of you are going to answer in whatever order you like. So I'll probably just end up calling on one of you to start. So how did you guys first get introduced to computer science? Was experience that you guys really remembered helped you realize that computer science or artificial intelligence was, the right career path for you? So, can I have Miss, sorry if I mispronounced this, but can I have Miss Bondi to answer this first?
Sure, no problem. And thank you so much for the question. Yeah, so I actually didn't start programming or anything specifically computer science related until I got to college. So kudos to all of you for being here and getting started with this a little bit sooner than I did. But yeah, so basically my path, I was interested in math and science, like I mentioned, and I did that internship in high school. So I decided to pursue imaging science in undergrad. And so while I was there, I actually started doing research, and that research was in particular on historical document imaging, basically taking pictures of old manuscripts or books or different types of things, even maps, in different wavelengths of light, and then trying to process them to see if we can recover any information that had been lost in them previously. This was all a really manual process. So while I was doing this, I was looking at different wavelengths of light, different pieces of these documents, and trying to put them together and process them just to see if I could find anything. And while I was doing that, I just kind of thought, there must be a better way to do this. I think that I should start trying to program. I think that maybe I could automate this somehow. And so I ended up taking a programming class my next year. And in that research, I ended up trying to use code to automate the process that I had been doing. And from that point, I was hooked and kept trying to do it throughout the rest of my research. Thank you so much.
Ms. Zhu, do you want to answer next?
Yes, happy to. Thank you so much, Sanjana. So similar to Liz, I did not start working in computer science until I went to college. And basically just one of the first classes I took during my first term in college was a computer science class. And I just fell in love right away. I just realized it's so much fun to build things. And no disrespect to engineers, but unlike engineering, I didn't have to go through all this physical hardware, and in order to make something tangible at the end, I could just do it anywhere on my computer and just type in some lines of code, hit run, and then bam, here was like a graphic that I made, a little video game that I made. It was just so instantaneous. You sort of get that instant gratification, which is just really, really fun. And if I wanted to make a change, I could just make my change, hit run again, and then see everything live. And as I mentioned, because I did web design before, it really just brought me the same excitement from when I was making websites for the first time and I first hit publish and was able to type in my domain name and then hit enter and then just like see that on the internet and know that somebody around the world could see it too. So just the feeling of being able to create things digitally and share it instantaneously with people was just so exciting to me. But then, so from there, I sort of decided, okay, computer science is what I want to do, but I didn't know what I wanted to do with it because I thought, okay, well, computer science is very mathy. Like these people work in software engineering. They do like boring things and write software and just do sort of boring stuff, like sort of behind the scenes, like just like a little hacker with like the green numbers and stuff like that. So I thought, okay, well, I don't really know what I want to do there. And then basically 2 or 3 years into college, I started thinking, well, what can I do with computer science? And I started thinking, well, what I really enjoy doing is computer science, and what I really care about is environmental sustainability. So is there any way to combine these things? And that's one of the things that I love about computer science and AI and machine learning is because it's so broadly applicable to all other fields, almost any other field. So many disciplines, whether it's psychology or economics or biology, are just dealing with larger and larger data sets. And we need some way to analytically process this, or we have all these images like Gracie does, and we have to figure out a way to methodologically go through all of them without a human just sitting there looking at millions of images and stuff like that. So then I thought, okay, well, how can I combine computer science with sustainability? And I found a number of grad programs that had professors who are working specifically at that intersection, which is how I found the lab that I'm currently part of and how I started my grad school career doing so.
That's awesome. So, Ms. Army, would you like to finish off?
Yeah, definitely. So similar to Lily and Liz, I did not learn to code until I got to college. So it's so cool that you all are already diving into this world. And yeah, I for sure never imagined I would be working in technology when I was younger. I had a lot of stereotypes about, like the green numbers flying down the screen, like Lily was talking about, and being like a hacker, just like sitting by yourself in an office somewhere. That's what I thought all technology jobs were. And I had no interest in that. And computers, quite frankly, frustrated me a lot. And I felt like technology was just like this intimidating thing that I would never really want to work on. So then when I got to college, Also, like Lily and Liz, I was really interested in math, and I thought that was kind of what I was going to pursue. But then I was fortunate to be accepted into this program trying to get more women into computer science and math when I got to college. And so I had to take a computer science class against my will. I was like, I'm going to take this one class, I'm going to be done, I'm going to forget about it forever. But then I just saw like the whole wide world like open up when I took that class. I had a really great professor who just really emphasized all the things you can do with computer science, and apply it in ways that are like helping people and helping the planet and helping to solve problems that I cared about outside of technology. You know, like Lily was talking about, you can basically apply it to any field. And so that just opened my eyes, and I never went back. I decided to major in computer science from that first class. So yeah, that was probably the moment that I remember the most, is just being in that class and like having my eyes opened in that way. So yeah.
All amazing answers, guys. Super cool that you know, it's not just that you have to commit to, you know, the subject at first. You can even get started later in life. It doesn't have to be just when you're younger. So next question. What has been your biggest challenge or limitation or, you know, problem in your field so far? When and how has it been solved? Or if it's ongoing, when and how do you think it will be solved? So I'll let Ms. Zhu answer this one first.
So I would say that one of the biggest unsolved problems in computer science right now is how we should be using this in a good way to help as many people as possible. So computer science is a very young field, and unlike engineering, where we have a very standardized set of best practices, like a bridge should be able to carry this capacity, and this is how we know that a skyscraper is sturdy enough. We have very specific metrics for how to practice engineering safely, but with computer science, we don't have those guidelines yet, just because we're still figuring it out. So as we're so quickly, just as I mentioned before, computer science is so fast, and that I can make a website, hit publish, and then somebody on the other side of the world can see it right away. That is so powerful, but it can also be problematic in some ways, because that means there's no one checking me when I'm putting something on the internet and sending something to the other side of the world, sharing information so quickly. So a challenge there is to figure out what kind of systems should we put in place to make sure that this is being used in a good way, and that it's only helping people and not harming any groups, and that we're considering all of these possibilities. So that's something that we need to be doing from the side of the government. So the government is, a lot of people in Congress right now are trying to think, okay, how should we properly regulate big tech companies like Facebook and Google and stuff? How can we make sure that they're not exploiting your data and taking care of all the photos that you upload on Instagram and TikTok, and I don't even know what else anymore. Similarly, how can we make sure that people who are working on artificial intelligence, for example, and doing all this image recognition, so all of Gracie's work to try to recognize orcas, that's going to be so helpful to scientists all around. But then some people are also using technology like that to try to do facial recognition for certain populations of people. And there have already been situations in San Francisco, for example, they banned the use of facial recognition all throughout the city because they were worried this might be used by some bad actors who don't have the best intentions. They're trying to monitor people. So ensuring that we have a set of best practices in place and proper regulation is something that everybody who is taking a part in computer science right now needs to be thinking more about.
Okay, Ms. Ermi, do you want to go ahead next?
Sure, yeah. I definitely second everything Lily was talking about. Maybe not as dire problem that I definitely face, almost like we think about almost every day in my teams, in my work, is how do we build AI that's actually usable by scientists. So, you know, I can build like the most accurate orca identification model ever assembled, but then if we don't package it in a tool that's like easy for scientists to use, then it's never going to be used. And so thinking about the importance of like user experience and user interface design is a huge part of artificial intelligence that I don't think we as a community have really fully figured out how to utilize yet. And so we're always thinking about that and trying to solve that problem and just make things that are actually useful for the scientists that we're trying to help.
Did I just go ahead? Okay, sure. Yeah, so I just wanted to echo exactly what Lily and Gracie both said. Both of these points are ones that I was hoping to bring up myself, so thank you both so much for stating them so eloquently. I guess I would just add that I think in both cases, it would be really, really helpful to emphasize and encourage work that's interdisciplinary. Between AI and scientists or AI in different fields like Lily and Gracie both mentioned earlier as well. And not only in academia or in industry, but also with people who are living through some of these issues themselves in the field, on the ground. And yeah, I think the other part of this is in order to encourage this type of interdisciplinary focus in AI is to have events just like this one early on when you're first starting to think about AI, and just encourage you to think about it as you are learning and in your education as well. So keep asking questions and keep in touch, keep thinking about these important things.
I think Sanju might be having some connection problems, so I'll just maybe take a question from the Q&A. I think maybe like just talking a little bit about different careers you guys decided between and that use machine learning. I know we have like a pretty broad and diverse like background set here, so I think it would be good maybe for you guys to give an overview of like where you can go using machine learning, how you decide between the different options, and what careers in each of these areas look like. Liz, do you want to start?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Yeah, so I think that there are many, many opportunities in AI and ML both. So we'll start by saying that I think just because what I say next might not sound interesting to you doesn't mean that ML isn't for you, because likely you could use it as a tool and no matter what you're interested in doing. That said, let's say you choose to major in something like computer science, then typically the options before you could be doing something like software engineering in a company, in industry. And what that might look like is you might be building some of these tools that Gracie alluded to that people would use, either scientists or even commercial applications like TikTok or Instagram or things like that. People with computer science degrees are probably working on those as we speak. So then if you decide that you'd like to try out research as well, then you might have some other options ahead of you in addition to industry. So in industry, you could go ahead and do some of the stuff like Gracie's working on, trying to answer new questions and pursue new areas that people haven't necessarily worked on before. You could also try to go to academia and do research from that perspective and maybe also work with students and teach students. And then there are also options in going into nonprofits, NGOs, and government, and also using similar background to work in those fields. And so in my experience, I've done a few internships in industry. I've worked at a government lab, in particular NASA JPL. And so I've had several of these experiences, and I think they're all awesome. But I personally decided I liked academia and doing research the most after trying some of these out. So main takeaway, I think, and I'd love to hear the other two panelists' perspectives on these choices as well. But in my opinion, I think the best thing you can do to start narrowing it down for yourself is to try as many things out as you possibly can. Try some of these internship experiences if they pop up while you're in undergrad, while you're in high school or whenever, and just see what you like.
I'll jump in and just add one other thing to think about is computer science can also be combined with very creative disciplines as well. So if you're someone who really enjoys art, that's a possibility as well, because there's a whole field of computer graphics. So if you've ever seen an animated movie, a Pixar movie before, they have teams of computer scientists who are working on all of the imaging and the rendering that you're seeing on screen. So all of those things combine very artistic disciplines with the math and the technology of computer science as well. So there's, it's not just you have to be mathematical or technical, but rather there's all sorts of different types of skills that can be combined with computer science as well.
Yeah, I think that,
so sorry about that, ladies. So
no worries.
Thank you for taking over. So what is some unique or personal advice you guys could give for, you know, students from middle school to high school about computer science and artificial intelligence? I'll let Miss Ermi start with this one.
Sure, yeah. So it's hard to narrow it down, I guess. So one piece of advice that I feel like I'm still trying to teach myself is just to kind of be more kind to yourself. I know, like, going through school, through college, at least when I was in those computer science classes, a lot of times I was one of very few girls in the classes, and the like imposter syndrome, if you've ever heard that term, that I felt, where you just feel like you don't belong and like maybe you won't be successful where you are. I felt that a lot of the time, and then I feel like the self-doubt just like piles on, and even if you're like doing well, you feel for whatever reason like you just can't succeed because you don't see yourself in the people around you, or for whatever reason it might be. So I really wish I had been a little bit more kind to myself, and just like sometimes take a step back and realize like what you have accomplished, and that you know, this field needs your voice. Like if you don't see people who look like you around you, then that's all the more reason why we really need you to stay in computer science and in AI, so you can bring your unique ideas to the table, and so that we can, you know, have a diverse group of people working on all of this stuff, because that's how we're going to solve these big problems, is to have many different voices at the table. So be kind to yourself, and yeah, you can definitely, you know, get through any kind of challenge that you're facing, because it's worth it in the end to get through and to be working on cool stuff that you are really passionate about. So that was kind of a lot of different pieces of advice wrapped up in there, but yeah.
So
Go ahead, Sanju.
So I think we're gonna have to cut the scripted questions, and I think we're gonna move on to the audience questions. So typically women are really underrepresented in computer science, so Do you guys personally face any gender-specific challenges in your field?
So I would say that there are very real challenges with being a woman in STEM, a woman in computer science, and a lot of those things aren't overt. So it's not always, people will talk about specific instances of harassment, or when people will specifically call out a woman for something, or specifically like question their abilities in front of publicly. And although those things unfortunately do happen, sometimes these things are not as obvious. And I would say that some of the self-doubt that Gracie had been talking about earlier comes from these sort of more subtle forms of challenges for women in computer science. So for example, just the feeling of being in a room full of people that are all male, which has happened a lot in many of my classes. And the thing is, these people could become my friends as well. So my friends, both in college and in grad school, were a lot of the people that I took classes with. And then I realized that I was in a room of 10 people and I was the only female there. And though in situations like that, even if I'm not conscious about about feeling small or feeling like, oh, there's no one else who looks like me, it does reinforce the feeling of being an outsider and the feeling of not being respected as much or not fitting in as much, just because there aren't other people like me who are around. So just becoming aware of that was really liberating in some ways, and helped me shed some of that self-doubt that Gracie had been talking about before, because it just made me realize that it's not because that I'm not capable, it's just because I have been one of the few to sort of like push through this path, and hopefully more and more and more people will do so. But I would recommend that one great way of getting past this is to just to use this as an opportunity to form closer friendships and bonds with people who are like you. So if there's another girl in your math class, try like sitting next to them or talking with them more. Or for when you go to college and you're working on when you have a final project to work on, try talking with the other girls in your class or the other people who are like you in that class, and just saying, hey, do you want to work on this? And just finding people who share these experiences with you, because I found that those have led to some of the strongest friendships, both in my time in college and afterwards.
So any of you other one like to add on? You guys can just go ahead.
Cool, thank you. Yeah, I guess I would want to echo exactly what Lily and Gracie have both brought up as some challenges that I faced, but I wanted to add to what Lily was suggesting in terms of trying to get through some of these challenges, and just say that there are a lot of communities that are starting to form to try to help make sure that you don't have that experience where you might feel like you're totally alone trying to do this on your own. So I would encourage you to seek some of those out. That could be different clubs on campus, like Women in Computing or Women in Science. There are also oftentimes mentorship programs. So right now, for example, I'm participating in a mentorship program with an undergraduate student where I talk with them maybe once a month just about what they're going through. I'm even a mentee myself, working with a professor at Harvard right now, talking about some of these challenges that we've gone through. For example, imposter syndrome, that's definitely real, and I've felt it as well. So these resources are super helpful to, again, make sure you're not alone and talk through some of these things.
Ms. Ermi, would you like to add on, or should we move on to the next question?
I think Lily and Liz, yeah, covered it. I would echo everything they said. Yeah.
All right, so, okay. Who or what inspired you to be where you are right now? So any of you could just start talking. You could just add on to each.
I can start off a little bit. So building off of what Lily and Liz were just saying, my Women in Computing Club in college was hugely impactful for me. I wouldn't have made it through the major, I don't think, without those women in that club. And they're still some of my most dear friends to this day. And I think they inspired me a ton to be where I am today. Just like the encouragement that they gave me to believe in myself and my abilities, inspired me to even decide to apply to things that I wanted to apply to, and internships and doing research in college and stuff. And that all led to me being where I am today. And so I took a lot of inspiration from my peers, because I don't think I had a ton of mentors who looked like me when I was in college and who were women. And so my peers became my inspiration, and they still are. So it's okay. If you can find mentors, that's amazing. And I had a lot of mentors who were men who were really inspirational to me and motivating to me. But my peers were also a huge source of inspiration.
I would say that one great form of inspiration for me just came through my teachers in high school and professors in college. And that's something I cherish a lot, just my relationship with those people who are my teachers and advisors. And something I encourage all of you to do, even now in middle school or high school, and especially when you get off to college, is try to get to know them outside of class if possible as well. So especially in college, a lot of professors will have office hours for their classes, where they have a few hours a week that they set aside for you to just come by, ask questions about the class, about the material, or anything else. Just if you're having trouble adjusting to college, or you really have found trouble sleeping and stuff like that, they are so open and to just trying to help you, support you in any way that you need in order to be successful academically. So trying to form relationships with those people, even though they might seem like older and more intimidating and have all this authority and status and stuff like that, but they've all been in the same position that you've been in as well, and they recognize those challenges. So taking those opportunities to chat with them and get to know them better. And then I've been lucky in that some of them have been the ones who encouraged me to apply to grad school when I didn't think that I would get in anywhere and stuff. So those people have all been great sources of inspiration for me.
Is there anything else that you guys would like to add? Because other than that, I think we're gonna wrap it up from here. No, all right. So I think I'm gonna hand it over to Ashwita.
Thank you, Ms. Bondi, Ms. Shu, and Ms. Ermi for the enjoyable and insightful panel. Those are very inspiring stories and experiences.